Ah, all right. It looks like we're live, Leslie.
Woohoo!
I'm so excited. It looks like it's actually working this time. We never know. We just never know.
Tech is always interesting.
It is, and you and I are both directors, right? So we're pretty used to people doing the tech.
Right?
Tech. Look at us bootstrapping, doing our own tech. Leslie, it's so great to have you here. I just love to introduce Leslie for a minute. Leslie is my longtime friend and colleague, creative colleague. She's an African American Southern woman from Virginia, encompassing all that that entails.
It's a lot.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness it's a lot. It's a lot of wonderful wonderfulness. She's a playwright and a director. She's the artistic director of the Charlottesville Players Guild, which is an all black theater company. She's the CEO and founder of EugeneMartin LLC, which focuses on empowering artists with the tools they need to take their art to the next level. Yes, like you were born to do that. You're born to do that. And what's really exciting, many things are exciting about Leslie, but what we're talking about today that excites me because I've just completely binge listened to it for the last 2 days is that Eugene Martin is producing a limited fictional series podcast called Grounds, which is the story of 5 black professors at a predominantly white university. We live in Charlottesville, Virginia, where the University of Virginia is right there, so it really hit home.
Yep.
And it really highlights the struggles and the joys of black academia. Leslie, I am obsessed with the podcast.
That's lovely to hear. Thank you.
I am obsessed with it. We'll get to it in a minute, but I I would just love to know what like this so in my coaching work and what I'm doing and what I'm doing with these Freedom Fridays, I'm really looking at people like you who are really turning life's trickiest moments into opportunities for fantastic transformations. And for you, that you do that for other people by helping them to have uh, a creative forum, a voice, giving people a voice.
Yes.
You do it yourself in your writing, in your directing, in theater, in producing, in all that you do. You do it in the podcast. And I have to say, oh shit, if I cry today, it's going to be, oh!
Conversation with you if you didn't cry. That's what happens when we get together. It's okay.
You, having lived in Charlottesville with you and seen how much you have led, transformed, uh, given voice to Black folks in Charlottesville, that you are changing the story of Charlottesville, and so I'm
I'm
really honored to
trying.
have you here.
I'm
Yeah,
trying.
and so the question is, how? Like, why? What? Like, how are you? So, Leslie, we'll start with like really specifically around this podcast. What inspired you? What got this ball rolling for you?
Yeah. So pandemic happened. And so all the things that I had planned artistically for that year just disappeared. And a good friend of mine, Teresa Dalvest, was doing a web series about her book, The Death of Cliff Huxtable. And what she did was she took each chapter and turned it into a conversation, not just about the characters and the show, but also about what the characters were dealing with in their lives. And so she asked me to be a panelist for 2 of those chapters. And
So
so I did
can I
that.
take a step? What is a panelist? What does it mean to be a
So
panelist?
I was basically, what chapters was I? I was like chapter 2 and chapter 11, and they were both talking about, one was talking about Black thought, and how a Black person in America kind of creates their own thought process about what it means to be Black in America. That was Theo's chapter, and then the other. So I was basically, she had actors act out the chapter, and then she had a group of panelists. So she had professors and artists and other, basically talking about what was going on in the chapter and just having a really in-depth conversation. Um,
I love
so I
that.
did that project with her, which was amazing. And then I started thinking, there's a lot that's missing. We don't talk about what it's like to be a Black professor. No one's done that. Like, all of the shows that we see in mainstream talk about the Black student experience, right? Dear White People, A Different World. All of them are talking about what it's like to be in a college setting as an 18-year-old. They don't talk about what it's like to be in front of those 18-year-olds and having to navigate a system that absolutely was never created with you in mind. So I started thinking about that, and once again, it's pandemic. So I was like, okay, well, we can't like get together and do things, but what can we do? And I was like, oh, I could do a podcast. And we recorded it all virtually, season 1. And it was also great because we were virtual. I could then contact people that I hadn't worked with. One of them I hadn't worked with ever, but people that I had worked with that weren't near me. So I literally called my friend in DC. I called JJ and I was like, hey, I have this idea for a podcast. You want to do it with me? And he was like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. Yes, let's go. And that's how it happened.
I love that.
Yeah, and it was really great. Like, all of my friends basically said, this is an amazing idea. I want to do it with you. Don't worry about paying me. And anybody who knows me knows I pay artists because it's work. And the fact that they thought so much about the idea that they were like, no, it's okay. This is fun. This is something I've never done before. This is like a new experience for me. I get to meet other people that I would never have met before. Yeah, let's do it. So yeah, it was an awesome experience. Um, but of course, like everything else I do, I come up with this idea and I make this plan and I get everybody excited. And then I realized, oh wait, that means I have to write 30 pages of dialogue every week.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to be laughing at you.
Like, how do I miss that, right? But that's what I do. I come up with the idea and I'm like, oh yeah, we can do that. Oh wait, I have to do that?
You throw
Okay.
down your own gauntlet. Yeah.
It's like, okay, we're gonna make it happen. Let's go. But I was also lucky enough that season 1, I had other writers collaborating with me. So the poems at the beginning of the episodes, a couple of them were actually written by the actor that was reading them. There was an entire scene in episode 4 of season 1 that was written by my good friend Lewis Hampton. So, and he was like, I don't know, I've never written anything like this before. I don't know. And I was like, well, try your hand. Let's go. Like, come on, let's do it. So it was a really great collaborative experience.
I love that. I love that. And it felt like, it felt so organic and natural. And it was really fun for Charlottesville insiders who are familiar with UVA, because there is a blend of fiction and reality. You have some characters who are real characters and then some who are fictional. How did you decide where to marry those two worlds.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for those people who know Charlottesville, you will get the double entendre in the name. And for those of you who aren't, it's just named after the coffee shop that they all go to. You know. But all of the experiences that happen in this podcast are actual lived experiences of Black professors. Because I realized I know a lot of Black professors, but I'm not one. So what I did was I called on all of my friends who are professors and I was like, hey, I'm writing this scene and this is what I want to happen, but I'm not really sure if that's how it actually happens when you're a professor. And they were all so amazing and just so open with me. And like I had A.D. Carson, who is the professor of hip hop at UVA. I had Kwame Otu, who's also a professor at UVA. I had Munir Nazir, who he's kind of bridges the gap. Like he's never been like physically in a class teaching. He teaches online at Cornell, but he's done that for like 20 years. And then I had Dr. TJ Talley, who is a professor of African history at San Diego. But before he went back to San Diego, he taught at Washington and Lee. And because of his experiences at Washington and Lee, he was like, I got to go back to California. Y'all people crazy. Mm-hmm. So I had this wonderful mix of professors that were giving me information about what it's like to walk in their shoes every day. Mm-hmm. And I remember I had a conversation with Kwame because in episode 6 of season 1, all of the guys get together and have like a guys' night, right? They're drinking bourbon and smoking cigars and, guy talk. And I'm like, I can write male characters. That's not a problem. But I don't know what or how conversations start in a room of academics. Mm-hmm. Like that's a different bailiwick. And especially all Black men, right? So it's just like layer upon layer upon layer of things that aren't my lived experience. And so I called, Kwame loves my grandchildren. So I literally sent him photos of the grandkids. And I was like, can I bribe you with photos of the grandkids for an hour of conversation? He was like, oh my God, they're so cute. Yes. And we talked for like an hour and a half about how this particular conversation would start and which one of the men would start it and how they would start it and kind of where it would lead and all of that. Like the way that they imparted their lived experience to me was just a treasure. Just a treasure.
Do you feel like that it has changed anything about how you understand Black men?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And not just talking with my professor friends, but also with the actors. This was a very collaborative process. So the one actor that I had never worked with before, Doug Spearman, who you guys might know from the Logo show Noah's Ark. He played a professor on Noah's Ark. And I've been friends with him literally on Facebook for like 15 years, but we'd never met in person. And so when I called him and asked him if he would do this, I was like, he's too big. Like, he's never gonna. And he immediately said yes. And I was like, oh, wow, this is cool. And what I would do is I would send the script to everybody like 3 or 4 days before we recorded and ask them, like, if something feels weird to you, if there's word choices that are weird, if something's phrased weird, it's not coming out of your mouth right, like, please let me know. I will do rewrites. I have no problem with that. And Doug was one of the ones who came back to me regularly, and he was like, that word choice, I don't think so. Mm-hmm. He was like, and he would also come back to me, like there were a couple of monologues in season 1 that he did, and he, after we recorded them, he was like, thank you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, I've been an actor for 30 years. I've never been able to do this kind of work. I've never been able to do this monologue. And I've always wanted to. Like, this is the stuff this is why I became an actor, right? To do this kind of stuff, to say these things. And there's never been someone who wrote it for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's something that just, it doesn't get any better than that. Like, I don't,
No.
at that moment, it's like, I don't care if this ever makes me any money. I don't care if, I don't care how many people see it or hear it or anything like that. The people that were involved were viscerally affected, and they got something really important out of it. And that is such a huge win, a huge win.
Yes, absolutely. And I also think, Leslie, that sort of the bonus, the bonus round, because that in and of itself is enough, right?
Yeah.
It's just enough. But earlier, before we went live, we were talking about, you were talking about how sharing vitriol won't change people's minds. Okay, now
Yeah.
I'm going to start crying. So what I really, really, one of the things that I really loved about season 1 and into season 2, but season 2 is more personal right now, whereas season 1 was really grappling with some more obvious cultural issues so far, right? And then it's become a little more subtle in season 2 so far. But that may shift. I don't know. I'll find out. But I loved a whole episode that dealt with the talk.
Yeah.
Right? And getting to, as a white woman, getting to hear that discussion and to really think about it, in the context of these characters that I knew and loved, that emotional connection to them. Thank you. Thank you for that. I think we know that emotions are how people engage and change.
Yep.
And so I know that also has to play some part in your motivation for this.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I have realized over the past few years that I always want to do in my work. Like, making somebody laugh is great, but it's fleeting. If you make somebody pee in their pants laugh, that's a great night for them. It's a great night for you. But 2 weeks later, whatever. Making someone cry because they have a visceral connection to what's happened, not necessarily even a tragedy, just something that a character that you created has to go through that you don't have to go through, sticks with them years later. They're still thinking about it. And I always come back to, so I remember when I saw the movie Hidden Figures, I saw it in the theater, and after the movie, I had to go to the bathroom. So I go into the bathroom, and it's the women's bathroom, so there's a line. There's always a line. And I'm standing there, and this woman in front of me is just ugly crying, right? Like, her face is a river. She's like wiping snot, the whole deal. And she turns around and she sees me and she goes, "Oh my God, I am so sorry for everything that my mother's generation did to your mother. Oh my God." And I'm like, "Ooh, bring it down, honey, bring it down. Ooh, calm it down. It's okay." And we're standing in the bathroom and she goes, "Go in front of me, go in front of me." And I'm like, I appreciate what you're trying to do here, hon. That movie was not about using the bathroom.
Nope.
That's not at all what it was about. But I appreciate that that's what you think in this moment that you can do.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
also know that that interaction has stayed with that woman,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? In a way that a Kevin Hart movie probably didn't.
Right. Right.
So that's what I continually try to create. Um, and I had to have that talk with my kids, um, and actually, what Omar says in that scene, that conversation that he has with his dad,
Mm-hmm.
was pretty much the conversation that I had with my daughter.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
she was like, "Oh no, I ain't letting nobody do that to me." I was like, "I
Mm-hmm.
understand, but please realize that this is real, and we all want to come home at the end of the day."
It is a great scene. It's a great scene, um, from a kid's perspective. I felt like it really did capture the way kids that age
Yeah.
respond to parents having
Yes.
those kinds of talks with them. But this is a very particular kind of talk, and I felt the weight of that, and as a parent, I just was like, whew, I want to go have a glass of wine with mom right now.
Right.
Like, um, because it's hard. Uh, and then, oh gosh, there are just so many things. I mean, Breonna Taylor comes up in the
Yeah.
plot, uh, dealing with that. The pandemic comes up as something real. Everyone really addressing it. It's really wonderful, and I'm so glad that you're doing it. I really want people to hear it. I also want to talk about, because you have done something that is phenomenal, which is now you've gotten a grant, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah. So at the end of season one, I asked all my actors, I was like, "Okay, if I write season two, would you do it?" And they were like, "Oh, yeah, of course we would." And so I was like, "But I'm not going to do a season two unless I can pay you." Like, that's because I just can't in good faith do that. So I wrote a grant to Virginia Humanities, and got it. Yay.
yay.
Mhm. So I had enough money to bring everybody to Charlottesville and record everything in a day. And of course, just like season one, I write the grant and I send it off and I kind of forgot about it. And then the news comes that I got it and I'm like, "Oh, great." And I email everybody and I'm like, "Hey, can we record this weekend?" And they're like, "Yeah, that works for me." And then I was like, that means I have to write an entire season. That means I now have to write 200 pages of dialogue in 3 weeks. Okay, here we go.
Whoa. I knew that you were under the gun because we talked right around that time.
Yeah,
Um, but I had not realized what a massive deadline you had.
yeah, yeah.
So you did it.
But I did it.
So it's all in the can.
It's all in the can. And it was awesome because I got to talk to a couple of other podcasters who are really doing it. And one of them, we had like an hour conversation and he was like, "Seriously?" He goes, "I love this idea. I love what you've done with it, but it needs a narrator." And I was like, "Huh, that's an interesting idea, like to kind of gel everything." And he was like, "We want to hear more about each person's life." And I was like, "Okay, how can I work that in?" So I got a lot of feedback, some really great feedback, and I really love the narrator. I love how I've kind of weaved the narrator into one of the characters. So the
Yeah.
narrator through most of season two is James, who is Eli's. I don't want to give anything away. Who is Eli's
Who has a connection with Eli.
Yes. So for most of season 2, James is the narrator. So it's kind of like you have this voice that is not really in it, but in it, kind of guiding you along. Like, no, I'm an outsider too, but let me explain.
Yeah.
And then each one of the characters gets to take over the narration at certain parts. And so yeah, it was really cool to kind of figure that out and weave it through. Yeah, and recording all day. we literally met at the Jefferson Theater, which is, it's a music venue here in town, but of course, because of the pandemic, it was not open. And I happened to be friends with the person that does all of their planning and sound design and all that stuff. And I was like, can we use it? And he was like, absolutely, come on in. So he set up tables, all socially distant and everything. And everybody came in on their, rotation of schedule. So I literally had a whole schedule of, okay, we're doing, episode 4, scene 2. These are the people, and everybody just kind of rotated in and out. And it was awesome. It was really awesome. And I'm so thankful because the one person that I had never met in person, I got to meet in person. I got to spend, Doug came all the way from Louisiana. And yeah, so I got to spend a whole day with him and like really get to know him, face to face. And I made dinner for everybody that night. So they all came to my house and it's really funny. I'm like texting them, right? And I was like, okay, the menu for Friday night dinner is meatloaf and whipped potatoes and greens. I was like, do you want apple pie or sweet potato pie for dessert? And Doug texts back in all bold letters, apple! Exclamation point, exclamation. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm making apple. Okay.
Okay, of course you were making this whole dinner for everybody on top of so Leslie wrote it, produced it, stars in it, directs it, and cooks dinner for everybody. That is so you. That is just so you.
I know, right?
So you.
Yeah. But it was great though. So we finished and everybody went back to their hotel and kind of chilled out for like half an hour. I went home and finished cooking. And then everybody came over and we had an amazing dinner. We laughed so much that night. Like there were so many jokes and stories told. And it was really funny because, Doug and I were like the oldest people at the table. And Doug also does his own indie films. Mm-hmm. And so he's like, no, you guys don't understand what just happened here. Like, he's like, I understand because I have been in this situation where you're like begging for money to get a project done. And then every night you lay your head down thinking, all right, I need $5,000 to get that. How's that? Oh, crap. And somehow it just happens. It all comes together. But it's a level of stress that you don't realize is going to happen until you're in it. Mm-hmm. And so Doug looks at me, he's like, girl, I know where you are right now. I was like, yeah.
How wonderful to be seen, honestly.
Yeah. And, Doug was he was like the old head at the table. He was like handing out advice to all of the younger actors at the table. It was really funny. It was really great.
So if you were the mom in the situation, you had someone to step into that
absolutely.
Father elder role.
Absolutely.
Really nice.
And it's so funny because Doug is he's so deadpan. Like if you just see him, you're like, ooh, what is he mad about? Oh, that's the face. And it's just how his face is. Like, he is literally he's the sweetest, most loving person, like would give anybody a hug, give anybody the shirt off his back. Like, he's so adorable. But if you just see him, you're like, ooh, what? Okay. Not gonna make you mad. I'll just be over here. So he'll say this like really sweet, loving thing, but the face that you get with it does not say that at all. It's this weird dichotomy.
So
But I
funny.
love it. I absolutely love it.
And you got to see it.
And I got to see it and experience it and like give hugs and everything. It was really awesome. Like we had my friend Kevin came from Atlanta, JJ came from DC. Like it was really great. And I got to introduce my nephew who at the time was only 15, who really wants to be an actor. Like that's what he wants to do. And I got to put him in the room with all of these Black men, all of these men who look like him, who have the same lived experience and have been doing it. Like this is their job for over 20 years. And to be able to make that connection for him and have him see like, no, sweetie, you really can do this.
Yeah.
And this is what it looks like. And this is what it takes. So it was an amazing experience all the way around.
That's so great. So how can we support this project? What can we do? How can people find it? Let's talk about that stuff.
Yeah. So you can find it basically anywhere you find a podcast. It's on Anchor, it's on Google Play, it's on iTunes. You just search for Grounds, a Black Cast. If you go on Anchor, it's under the company name, so search for EugeneMartin. And actually, the next episode of season 2 drops next week.
Yeah. Yay! I mean, you're in trouble now because now I know that you've written the whole thing, and I'm gonna be like, Leslie, what happens next week? It's next month, right? Are you dropping them monthly or?
So season 1 was 10 episodes. Season 2 is 6. I had to write this same amount of material though, because with season 2, I kind of got the room to make scenes longer, to elongate the conversations. So like an episode in season 1 would have been like 7 scenes, but each scene would have been like 4 minutes. And in season 2, there may be only 4 scenes an episode, but each scene is like 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. So it's an elongated conversation that we're having in season 2.
It's great. And everybody should listen to it. It's so fun to listen to. It's rich. It's rich storytelling, and I'm grateful for you. Keep making art, and everybody should support the art that you're listening to and that's keeping you entertained. I want you to think about what your pandemic would have been like without the entertainment that you had to keep you going, and this is particularly wonderful entertainment. So thank you.
Yeah, and I'm already thinking about whether or not I'm going to do a season 3.
Well, if you need a problematic white woman, I'll work for free. I'm in.
Oh wow, that could take a lot of acting from you, Bree. But okay.
No, it won't.
Challenge.
It would be fun. Leslie, I adore you. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us.
No, thank you. This was awesome.